Hi everybody, Amir Fazeli here, founder and head coach of Adonis Athletics, strength and conditioning coach and sports scientist. In this video, I'm going to run you through a very sneaky and often forgotten training method that can help you greatly with making strength and muscular gains while training at home, and that thing is called isometric training. Because most of us go to the gym on a regular basis, we're used to seeing what's called a dynamic contraction when a movement has an up and down phase to make a rep. While that's definitely one way to contract muscle and create force, it's not the only way. There are actually three ways. One is a concentric contraction, where the muscle shortens as it produces force. For example, as you push the bar up during a bench press, the pecs are contracting to get the bar up. The other is an eccentric contraction, where the muscle lengthens as it produces force. For example, during the down part in the bench press, the pecs are contracting while they're lengthening as they produce force to allow that to happen. The other one is an isometric contraction, where the muscle produces force without changing length. Now, when we want to build muscle, there is one rule we have to observe amongst some other rules, and that is that in order for there to be a hypertrophy response, we need to bring the muscle close to failure or even to failure. When training for strength, there's also at least one rule we have to adhere to, and that is that we have to use enough of an intensity so there's an increased drive from the nervous system to the muscle to call on more and more muscle fibers. When we do this over and over again, we get stronger, partly because our brain becomes better at calling on more muscle fibers to activate and produce more and more force. The good news is, if you don't have super heavy equipment at home, super heavy weights, and you can't get your hands on anymore for whatever reason, you can still make these two very important conditions happen through isometric training. If you want to keep developing muscle, then you can hold an isometric contraction until voluntary muscular fatigue happens, as long as it goes for a long enough duration. If you want to build strength, then you can apply force against an immovable object above a certain threshold of intensity for about the same duration as your normal sets of singles, doubles, triples, fours or fives would have taken you, and you will have a significant effect. The only drawback with isometric training is that it is highly joint specific. So you're going to, for example, if you're going to bench from the bottom, you will get a lot of the isometric contraction benefits to your bench press will carry over at around that portion. Give or take a few degrees, obviously, but you will feel it around there. Similarly, for muscular development, of course, we know that at different parts of the lift, we're going to use different muscle fibers of the same muscle group. So using just one angle is not going to be optimized for developing as much muscle fiber. So the solution is that you would do the isometric contraction at 3 to 4 different parts of the movement. So here, here, and here, for example. So you do the bench on the chest, fist length above, in the middle portion, and then some towards the lockout of the lift. By the way, this joint-specific adaptation isn't such a bad thing when it comes to strength development, because sticking points in lifts are basically due to you not being able to produce enough force at that particular joint angle for one reason or another. Now, if you customize your isometric work to create more force at that exact point, then chances are very favorable that you could use this novel stimulus to bust through your plateaus. So what would a set of isometric contractions look like, and how would you set it up? Let me show you how, using our bench press example, even if you don't have a bench press at home. So here are just two things you're going to need to make this work. One is a tie down set. Okay, you can get these from a hardware store. For those of you in Australia watching this, you can go to Bunnings and get yourself one of these. This one cost me, I think, $8.50. It has a 300 kilo rating, and it can be used for a whole bunch of stuff, which we did DIY videos on. I did DIY videos on how to make your own homemade gymnastic rings and whatnot, but it's perfect for isometric work. Okay, this has 300 kilo capacity, and it's 4 meters in length. So you're gonna need one of these, and you're gonna need a pole, a metal pole of any kind. Okay, just something that's good and sturdy. It's not going to bend or break on you. Okay, now let's set up the actual bench press. So first thing you want to do is, well, in this case, it's not going to be a bench press, it's going to be a floor press, okay? But if you wanted to do a bench press because you want the extra range, because obviously when you're on the floor, this is as low as your elbow can go because you're limited by the floor. But if you want to get that extra range, if you don't have a bench at home, you can just lie down on a chair, because this is not a weight bearing exercise. So a chair is not going to break. It's going to allow you to get that extra range and do it from that position, okay? But for this purpose, I'm going to demonstrate it just off the floor. Do it basically like a floor press, okay? So you want to set this, you want to first set this tie down so that when you put it around you, once you lie down, and you feed that pole through, that it's going to be at the angle you want to work. So I want to work this angle, right? About this much off my chest. So I've already set this obviously for myself. You set it for yourself at whatever angle you want to work at, whether it's going to be lower, if you're going to do it on a bench or a chair, if you want it to be mid portion, if you want it to be towards lockout, whatever. And by the way, what I'm explaining to you now is obviously just an example for the bench press, for the floor press. You can use this for the deadlift, you can use it for squats, you can use it for bicep curls, you can use it for tricep work, you can use it for anything. Just let your imagination run wild, okay? So I've set that position for myself. So now it's time to actually get it going. Let's have a look. All right, so it's time to set it up. Grab your tie down, grab your pole, and get into position. Once you're on the ground, you want to make sure that the back of the tie down is right at the top where your armpit is, right at the corner of your armpit. Because if it's too far down here, that's not a natural benching path. It's not a natural path of force development. You're not going to be out here. When you normally bench, you would normally be much more out here. So you want to also mimic that, right? You want to make it as specific as possible to how you're going to be benching and where the bar would be at that particular point of the lift for you, okay? So probably have it a little bit higher. Once you've set that, grab your pole and feed it through. Make the final adjustments that you need. Grab on tight. Oh, by the way, this is probably a little bit more comfortable if you let the strap go underneath your armpit, not like this, like this. Make final adjustments. Make sure that these are all symmetrical. Make sure that this is symmetrical as can be. Make sure your grip is symmetrical. And then when you're ready, you want to apply force. You want to push as hard as you can for a preset amount of time. We'll talk about the time in a second, but I'll just demonstrate for now for a couple of seconds. So guys, you saw how easy it is to set up something like that for yourself at home. Now you can only imagine how you would be able to set that up for the squat, for the deadlift, and whatever else you wanted to apply that to. So a little bit about the duration, the timing. How long should you hold it for? Well, you just got to think back to how you would normally train. There's nothing different here. It's all muscular contraction and duration of muscular contraction and intensity of muscular contraction at the end of the day, right? Let's take, for example, the bench press when you're trying to do some hypertrophy training, just some bodybuilding work. When you're doing a set of bench at like 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps, how long does that set go for? It probably lasts from anywhere between 20 to 30, maybe 35 seconds or so, right? So in the same sense, you want the length of the isometric contraction in this case to also go for about that same period. But you also got to think about the intensity conversely, because as the length, the duration goes longer and longer, obviously you cannot maintain the same amount of intensity. And in the same sense, in the real world, when you're doing bench press for a set of 10, obviously you're not working at, say, 90% of your max, your best, right? 90% of your max 1 RM. You're doing it at like 60, 65%, 70% of your best. So in the same sense, if you're trying to do it for a long period with an isometric contraction, the amount of force you push out has also got to be around that 60, 65, 70% intensity. Now, obviously, there's no way for you to actually quantitatively measure what that intensity is. You don't have any kind of measurement devices, but you can do the next best thing, which can also be very accurate, and that is to have a feel for what it feels like. When you're pressing, are you pressing as hard as you can? Is it a 10 out of 10? Or is it more like a 6 out of 10? You want it to be around that 6, 7 out of 10 or whatnot, right? Depending on your goal. So that's how you want to think about it. The other way you want to think about it is, if you're going to go for a 30-second contraction, then just in the same way that in training, when you're doing a set of 10, by the time you get to 10, you're almost fatigued in the first set. Not quite completely fatigued, but almost fatigued. It's the same thing. You want to apply enough force so that by the time you reach that 30-second mark, you're almost fatigued in the same proportion. And if you do that, you still get the same kind of results. Because at the end of the day, it's just muscular contraction. It's just that the nature of it is different. There's no lengthening or shortening of the muscle, but the drive from the nervous system to the muscle is the same. The amount of work and locally, the amount of fatigue the muscle fibers go through is still the same. All of it is still the same. You just have to work at multiple different joint angles to get a more complete benefit, a more complete picture. In the same sense, when you're trying to use this method for the improvement of strength, what you would do is you have a think about your actual sets in training. If your normal program calls for a set of 5, okay, how long does a set of 5 go for? 15, 20 seconds at the most probably. So let's just say 15, just for argument's sake. So you would hold that contraction for 15 seconds in the same intensity, right? Conversely, again, a more extreme example. If you want to do like a 1 rep sort of max, right? As one effort in isometric fashion, as hard as you can go. In a 1 rep max, how long does a typical 1 rep max last for? It probably goes, if it's not an absolute eyeball busting 1 rep max, it's probably going to go for 6, 7, 8 seconds. So in the same sense, when you're pushing as hard as you can, if that's what you want to emulate, you're going 100% effort and intensity, as much force as you can develop for about 6, 7, 8 seconds. And if you do it like that, you will still get plenty of significant results using isometric training, guys. There is nothing to panic about, nothing to fear about. If you're stuck at home, if you don't have access to the gym, especially during this time with the pandemic going on, you can still use sports science to your advantage. There's still plenty of ways that you can get your training done so that when this is all over and you go back to the gym, you haven't not only regressed, not only have you not regressed, but in fact, you may have progressed. And at the very worst case, you can definitely maintain your strength and your muscle size during this entire time until we're back to normal. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comment section below. If you found this video useful, please share it around, please subscribe, and stick around for more videos.